So let's talk about a story you've probably seen floating around the internet. The idea that a single, ultra-powerful family, the Rothschilds, actually started World War I. Today we're going to dig into that. I mean, think about that for a second. The claim is that a family of bankers secretly pulled the strings to engineer a global war that killed millions of people, all for their own profit. It's a massive accusation. So, is there any truth to it? All right, let's just rip the Band-Aid off right away. The answer, according to pretty much every professional historian out there, is a hard no. This is considered a conspiracy theory, not a historical fact. But to really understand why this story is so persistent, we need to peel back the layers. Because like with many of these big theories, there's a little kernel of truth at the center, a piece of reality that gets stretched and twisted way out of shape. To get it, we have to understand just how powerful the Rothschild family really was. Okay, so who were the Rothschilds, really? Starting in the late 1700s, Mayer Amschel Rothschild kicks off a banking business. Then his 5 sons just explode across Europe, setting up shop in the biggest cities, London, Paris, Vienna, you name it. In just a couple of generations, they built an international financial powerhouse like nothing the world had ever seen before.
So what was their secret sauce? How did they get so influential? Well, their main gig, their bread and butter, was financing governments. Kings and countries needed cash for everything, building railroads, managing their debts, and, yep, fighting wars. They famously helped fund the British war effort against Napoleon.
And right here, this is the absolute key point. They were bankers. They profited from lending money to countries for wars that were already happening. They weren't the puppet masters starting the fires. They were more like the guys selling the fire hoses. You can kind of see how someone could make that logical jump, right? If you profit from war, maybe you caused it. But that's a huge leap, and it's not backed up by facts. Okay, so we have this reality of them being incredibly powerful bankers. How on earth does that morph into this giant, sinister story about them engineering a world war? This is where the funhouse mirror effect comes in. The historical reality is that they were financiers. The conspiracy claim twists that, saying they were the architects. It's a subtle but massive shift, right? It changes them from being reactive businessmen to proactive, evil masterminds. So the theory basically goes like this. There's this secret cabal that controls all the money, and their whole game is to intentionally start wars to get countries to go into massive debt that they, of course, will finance. And World War I, well, that's supposedly their greatest hit, their masterpiece of manipulation. All right, so let's put on our historian hats for a minute and fact-check this thing. Why doesn't this theory hold up to scrutiny? Well, one of the biggest holes is a logical error called the profit motive fallacy. It's the mistake of thinking that just because someone benefits from something, they must have caused it. You know, an arms dealer makes money from a war, but that doesn't mean they started it. Profit does not equal cause. Historians basically have 4 big reasons why they say no way to this theory. 1, there's just no evidence. 2, it completely ignores the real reasons the war started. 3, it gets their level of power wrong for that time period. And 4, a war like this was actually a huge, unpredictable gamble for them, not a guaranteed win. Let's break those down.
First off, what actually caused World War I? Man, it was a mess, a total powder keg. You had these crazy, tangled alliances, like a web where if you pulled one string, the whole thing came crashing down. Add in super intense nationalism, countries fighting over colonies, a massive arms race, and then, boom, an assassination lights the fuse. This wasn't a precision-engineered event. It was a chaotic, out-of-control avalanche. And the second point is that this idea of them having total control is, well, it's out of date. By 1914, their peak influence was actually in the past. The financial world was way bigger and more complicated. You had new power players like JP Morgan in America. Plus, big national banks were on the rise. The Rothschilds were still a big deal, for sure. But they weren't the only ones calling the shots anymore. Not by a long shot.
Okay, so if the evidence isn't there, and it flies in the face of what we know about history, where did this story even come from? And folks, this is probably the most important part of this whole conversation. The truth is, this myth isn't really about financial history at all. Its roots are deep in centuries-old, ugly anti-Semitic stereotypes. The Rothschild family is Jewish, and the conspiracy theory was tailor-made to tap into hateful and false ideas about Jewish people. It's so central, in fact, that it's been called a central pillar of modern anti-Semitism. The family's name became a kind of shorthand, a symbol used to push these incredibly harmful stereotypes about secret Jewish control of the world. And as propaganda, it was brutally effective. It plays on this stereotype of a greedy, manipulative figure pulling the strings behind the scenes. It was pushed hard by groups like the Nazis, and it shows up in completely fabricated texts like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, a proven, famous forgery. It's about taking a real family to make a hateful lie seem believable.
All right, let's wrap this up and put the myth and the reality side by side.
When you lay it all out, the difference is just huge. The myth gives you this simple story, evil architects driven by greed based on stereotypes. But the historical reality, it's way more complex. It's about a messy storm of political factors and a family who were powerful financiers, not puppet masters. And most importantly, it's backed up by actual documents and evidence.
So why should you care about a century-old conspiracy theory? Because this pattern, taking a small bit of truth and twisting it to fit a dangerous agenda, it happens all the time, even today. Being able to spot this is a crucial skill in our modern world of information and misinformation. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. History is almost never simple. It's complicated and messy. So the next time you come across a story, any story, that gives you a simple answer and a really clear bad guy for a massive, complex event, it's always worth taking a second to ask yourself, what complexity and maybe what agenda is that simple story trying to hide?